Before I introduce you to my next guest today, I want to make sure that you're aware of a training and coaching resource to help you increase your productivity, clarify your purpose, and improve your communication skills. It's called the Next Level Coaching and Leadership with Purpose programs. To learn more, simply go to warrenwandling.com, and under the programs tab, you'll find both of those resources. Again, that's WARRENWANDLING.com. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of How to Become an Obstacle Buster. I'm your host, Warren Wandling, the show that's dedicated to helping leaders to overcome their obstacles, build resilience, and achieve success. And I have a phenomenal guest with us today, Dia Bondi. Welcome to the show, Dia.
Hi, Warren. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here.
Yeah,
I like busting obstacles. Let's do some of that.
I think you have some great unique skills that our listeners are going to love, how you actually approach that topic.
Sure. All right, where do you want to start? Let's go.
So let's do this. So you have an interesting background because you're a communication catalyst, a speaker, author of Ask Like an Auctioneer, How to Ask for More and Get It.
Yes.
Coach VC-backed founders, executives, ambitious professionals to speak powerfully when the stakes are high. So with that short, just kind of introduction of kind of your background, kind of share with our listeners that aren't familiar with your background a little more about your business.
Sure. Yeah, I've been a leadership communications coach for nearly 2 decades, and that has been a extreme lesson in leadership voice. I've got the great opportunity to help Rio de Janeiro win the right to host the 2016 Olympics, worked across many Olympic cities and with other organizations in the Olympic movement and global sport. Have had a great opportunity working with VC-backed founders to help them build businesses that matter, and senior leaders in organizations who need to address a particular moment in their business, whether it's a product launch, they've stepped into a new leadership role, or they're establishing their voice in a market to lay the groundwork for their sales teams, to help them speak powerfully. And when I wrote my book, Ask Like an Auctioneer, it felt like a side quest, what my son, who's a gamer, would call a side quest. Realized that when we ask for more and get it, it is a moment where we need to speak powerfully and in alignment with who we are and challenge our own assumptions about what's possible. All of my work is wrapped up in speaking, coaching programs, and writing. Although I've only written one book, I see another book in my future. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds. Yeah, I'm interested in what kind of. Do you already have the topic picked by chance, or is that under wraps and not ready to bring?
Well, so the work, we're going to talk probably today a lot about how to ask like an auctioneer, yes. And that book is just a wild harebrained idea I got that hit me one night when I was falling asleep in bed because I had picked up this bizarre impact hobby of fundraising auctioneering. And I realized that so many of the lessons I was learning were applicable to how we think about asking for more and getting it in our careers and lives and businesses. But the 20 years of leadership communications work I've done, I've not written about. I have a framework that sort of underpins my approach to that. I call the platform map, which is a 4-part framework for helping a leader really find their voice, which sounds like a squishy, squashy thing to do, and it's actually not. And so I have a hint that the platform map and what that means as a tool for leaders is probably my next project.
Very interesting. So what do you think is the greatest obstacle your clients encounter?
Well, I mean, obviously the answer, you're going to hate me because I'm going to say it depends all the time because context is everything. And I think one of the biggest obstacles is sort of assuming they need to adopt another voice that is not uniquely theirs in order to be successful in a particular moment. But that creates an obstacle for them by, in my communications work anyhow, by forcing them to run up against the problem of, for example, for folks who are listening, maybe you're a leader who has product marketers working with you who write your scripts for product launches. And you look at that thing and you go, or you're a leader who does an all hands every week or every other week, and you have communications professionals that are writing your talk track for you. Well, when we assume that we have to kind of go with what they're writing, we run up against that and feel pretty underpowered because it produces a feeling like this doesn't sound like me. And I'm trying to make this thing that somebody else wrote or produced or created for me sound like me. And I don't know how to do that. How do I make it work? instead, when we flip the script and go like, well, who are you and what voice do you bring to these moments? Then we can create a bridge between your unique voice and the things that need to be said. And that is wildly freeing and also much more high impact. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, really interesting. It's kind of interesting in reference to that leader's perspective when they have someone's writing the copy for them and then they're trying to find their voice. I would assume part of that challenge is not being authentic in who
Correct.
they are as a leader.
Correct. And the difficulty of trying to go, how do I make this script work, when they should be asking the question, how do I make this script work for me? Because it is in the bridging of your unique voice in your domain and your market to the message that your organization, brand, or product needs to deploy in the world that positions you as a leader, because you're using your unique voice to amplify the message of that needs to be told, whether you're shipping a new AI product or you're launching new features the world needs to be, or you're starting a business from the very beginning. When we have a sense that you are speaking uniquely and from the heart and delivering the message that needs to be told from that voice, it's so much better for everybody.
Yes. So how does fear of asking for too much limit our potential of opportunities and earnings?
That's shopping from your own wallet, Warren.
Yeah, exactly. I love your terminology. It just really hits home.
It's a funny way to think about it, but when we are worried, when we design, so this is shifting gears into the world of asking for more and getting it, whether you are a founder that's going out and, selling your first big $1 million client, or you are, a leader in your organization who is making asks that resource the projects that you're working on, or, you're an individual career person who is looking at making asks around a raise or a better comp package or the kinds of projects that elevate the visibility that you have in your organization. When we design our asks based on, quote unquote, what I think I can get, because that is the biggest, most common question I get from people when they say, not what should I ask for, but how much, they will say to me, well, what do you think I can get? When we design what we think we can get, we're essentially designing for safety, because we're pretty guaranteed, when we answer the question, what I think I can get, we're going to answer it with what I think I can get, something that we think is a yes. But we don't actually know. That's shopping from our own assumptions, our own idea about what big looks like. And it's so driven by the context. I say sometimes that like if we shop from our own wallets, we end up only asking for what we can afford. So
Yes.
this is an obstacle that we put in front of ourselves, and busting through it means answering the question, what do I think I can get? Asking a different question, which is, what do I think might threaten getting a no?
Oh, wow. That's a more powerful question.
And then going for
It's
that.
scary. Yeah.
It's scary. Now, I'll tell you what, people will ask for what they think will get rejected, and then they'll get a yes, and they'll end up with more than if they had designed an ask based on the question, what do I think I'll get a yes to? And sure, it is scary because there's a real no out there, but go ahead and touch it and negotiate down. It's not the end of the conversation. It's part of the conversation.
So when you're working with leaders to be able to like move in that direction, like we have leaders that are listening to this call that say, okay, yes, I like this concept of asking for more. What's one simple strategy that you would teach a leader where to begin with it? Like, I think that because it's tied in with limiting beliefs and some other process, what's one simple strategy that you'd help a leader to embrace to stepping into that question?
So I'm gonna give you two. I know you said one, but I'm gonna give you two. Yeah, go ahead. Everybody can handle it. I think y'all can handle it. Okay. Number one, we want to design our asks based on what we think we can, what we think will get us not thrown out of the room. That's a funny way to say it, but is going to get like a no, not that. Let's have a conversation. Because when you do that, when you hit a no, you know that you've maximized the potential of an ask. That's what we do as auctioneers. The problem is you call it scary. I call it everything that all the asks we might make that are so big, we feel a little freaked out about it, is because those asks live in a place where we have no idea what the answer will be. And that puts us in a state of freaking out. I call all those asks that live in that no guarantee zone, live in the zone of freaking out, or we can call it the ZOFO, okay, for short. It's
Mm-hmm.
my favorite term for it. Okay,
Zova,
so
I love that.
yeah. So if the big, juicy, scary, oh my God, Hail Mary kinds of moments live in the zone of freaking out, we have to actually make those asks, and that's hard because they make us freak out, right? Like, how do we make those asks when they're so ZOFO-ish? We do it by borrowing some of the ideas and lessons I learned from my impact hobby of auctioneering. And one notion is that people are super irrational. And if you don't like that, you can think of it as remind yourself that their rationale for what they might say yes or no to is not your rationale for what you might say yes or no to. We just don't know. Now, people who are leaders in organizations are like, yeah, right, Dia, but we're data driven around here. I'm like, I know. But how many wild, harebrained ideas have come across the desks of other leaders in your organization and have been the clincher for a product that went viral right? It's sometimes the harebrained things that are the clinchers for things. So don't try to pretend that we don't also have the courage to ignore the data and make other decisions, make other choices. So that comes from my impact hobby of auctioneering, because we would plan out and think that what everything would sell for at a live auction, it never went the way we thought. Because what we thought was high value was not to the audience. What they thought was, low value was not. So we just have to go ahead and take the risk of asking and seeing and finding out. So that's one idea. The other idea is to recognize that a big ask is not the end of the conversation. It can be the beginning. And that sometimes can loosen the grip of making a bigger ask. Now, I will also offer that for leaders who might be listening, making a big ask that feels harebrained, that feels irrational, has the potential to damage your reputation and credibility. You don't want to be coming across as unhinged or disconnected from reality. Understand that. Okay. I've had that come up a fair bit in some of my workshops and talks. True. But hiding the big ask is not the solution. What you can do is position the big ask as a truth about what it might take. If you're building a new team and you're like, I need 12 headcount to build out this new team, and you know that is disconnected from the reality of the what the business can afford, okay, or where the priorities are. There's nothing that can't say that you can lay out the case for why that team matters in the world, how it's going to help you be successful, and just simply say, when this is at full operation, this is a 12-person team. Now let's have a conversation about what we can actually do to get as closest to that as possible. So you're not making the ask at 8 heads or 7 heads or 6 or 5 or whatever feels safe. You're signaling to the room what it would really take, even though it's disconnected from what's possible. So people understand what the tallest ask is, and then just open the conversation about how can we get closest to that.
Yeah, and I would assume based on that strategy for leaders that start embracing that, as they do that process more, their level of confidence of asking for more and expecting to get it changes the conversation for them to be able to show up at a different level as a leader for their clients.
100%. Here's what it would really take, and then shut up, see what they say, and then have the conversation. If they want to problem solve how we get 12 with you, great. But if they want to problem solve how we get as close to 12 as possible,
yeah,
that's even better. Even if you walk out with 8, but if you had asked for 6 because you were too afraid, you'd end up 2 heads shorter than you could have gotten. Hear that?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm really curious around your strategies of asking in the power of an auctioneer. So what are some other strategies that you can share with our listeners to help them understand what you've learned in that? You said so-called, was it a hobby originally?
Yeah, for me, I took a sabbatical, as you do.
Yes.
I put myself on a timeout for a year, and I did The Artist's Way, end to end. If folks don't know what that is, it's a lovely book to reconnect with your own creativity. And I did a lot of push-ups, and I went to auctioneering school, literally making good on a threat I'd made at a dinner table 10 years before, like just for fun. And when I got back to the Bay Area, I started doing fundraising auctioneering for women-led nonprofits and nonprofits benefiting women and girls, just for what I call an impact hobby. It was a hobby, but it had a specific, I wanted to put more money and decision-making power in the hands of the people that were having impacts on the population I was hoping to support. And then all of doing that, just I learned all this stuff, that was useful. And I think this next sort of strategy overlaps a lot with leadership voice, which is when you're going to go make an ask, it's really critical that you identify the offer inside of the ask. And it's not an issue of, tit for tat kind of, you give me this and I give you that. It's not, I don't want to position it as bargaining, but instead to really understand that part of your job to set up that ask is to identify truly what the offer is inside of it that helps the people that you're making the ask of advance what matters to them. So for example, I'll give folks an example. For example, if I'm standing in front of a room in an auction setup, I'm about to ask people for a lot of money. And in some cases, they might not be taking anything home with them. They're making what's called a direct pledge. They're just raising their paddle in the air and saying, yes, I'm in for $10,000. Yes, I'm in for, $50,000. Yes, I'm into it for $1,000. So I have to think, what's in it? What matters about that give to them, and set up that ask. So for example, I might say, tonight you'll have the opportunity to make a pledge to this organization, which gives you the chance to live in alignment with your values, which allows you to be part of a collective and radical act of generosity in a community that you live in every day. Maybe I'm doing an art auction to say, folks, tonight you'll have an opportunity to pledge and also bid on art. Maybe tonight is the night you get your first piece of art and you can call yourself a collector. Maybe tonight's the night that you take home that piece of art. Do you see what I'm doing here?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
It's not you give me 10 grand and I give you a piece of art. That's transactional.
Yes.
I'm talking about helping people be part of something that matters to them. For a new art collector to walk away and say, oh my God, I bought my first piece of art tonight. I can call myself I'm starting my collection. I can call myself a collector. What a joy. So when we talk to our audiences and for leaders who might be, experiencing an obstacle around how do I set up this ask, I want you to consider who across the table you're talking to and what they care about. Sure, they care about a successful product launch. Sure, they care about increasing their annual recurring revenue by 10%. Sure, there's all the business metrics. And then there's also the appealing to what matters to them. Is that person someone who loves to be a pioneer and loves to go first and get to show off about it? Are they someone who's a late adopter and risk mitigation is really important to them? How is this ask that you're about to make helping them achieve safety and also stretching into something new? So we've got to consider, it goes back to this notion that people are irrational. They are making decisions with their guts.
So is that, in reference to what you just shared, is that what you call the speaker's voice?
The leader's voice.
I'm sorry, the speaker. I said speaker. Pardon me. The leader's voice. Yes.
I mean, I think it contributes to your leadership voice when you are known as someone who can observe and tap into the true motivations of the decision makers in front of you on multiple levels. That sets you apart. That is a high impact voice setting up a courageous ask. Now, there is a specific thing I mean by leader's voice when we talked about the platform map earlier, but I think what you're pointing to, it is a way in which we can speak powerfully in a really critical moment.
So I love your formula, though, that you laid out for our listeners in reference to reevaluating before they ask and creating the internal why. It's more of the relationship connection to the why, so it's emotional, instead of the transactional, because it's the same thing, 10,000 for a piece of art or creating this memory and elevating someone that walks out of the room that feels like they're on a new journey.
100%. Yes, the difference between give me 20 grand and I'll give you this car so you can get from A to B, or give me 20 grand and I'll give you this car that'll allow you to take your family on new adventures coast to coast. It's just, see the difference?
Yeah, right. Yes.
I think, we pull punches. I find, I coach so many leaders at really high stakes moments that they just default to the scripts that are written for them, which are about features and benefits, features and benefits, features and benefits. And if you want to distinguish yourself in a particular market, we have to have the courage to speak to the deeper needs of the room. It's like connection is what people want, and it's the very thing that we're most afraid of. We all want it, but we're all scared to do it because in connection there's some vulnerability.
Yeah, so then that is so true. And it's a lot easier to go stay on script, if you will, instead of venturing off and doing what you ask them to do, is to go for the big ask.
Totally. So let me say that, there are leaders probably listening today who have teams that write talking points for them for customer. Maybe you own an agency and you have a pitch team that's putting together the pitch and you're there as a founder, sales voice, etc. Fine. You need to stay on message. It's in the in-between moments. It's in the what example stories that you select to bring to life what you're talking about in the product that day. It's the way in which you introduce yourself to the room that is the place where your voice can come alive in a way that bridges to the script without stepping on or replacing the script.
Yeah, I love that. So can you expand a little bit about having a leader to be able to find their voice? Why is it important for a leader to really be able to find their voice?
Well, it's funny. That we even say find your voice is a surprise to me. It was never how I talked about this work at all. Until I did a handful of years ago a bunch of exit interviews, and folks told me, "Oh my gosh, doing this work, like I found my voice." And these are high impact, transformational people. Like these are people who are not lost, but they just haven't opened their eyes to how much of their unique story can be infused into those critical communications moments that show up. So when I say find your voice, what I'm talking about, can I just give folks a little preview of what I mean using the platform map? That might be useful for folks.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So it is having a clear sense of purpose in your voice, knowing what role you play in the room. And I'm not talking about your job. I'm talking about, think about the boards that you've been on, think about the executive teams that you've been on, think about the cross-functional teams you've been on. Everybody in that room, despite their job, plays a different role. There's the peacemaker, there's the idea challenger. Think in terms of archetypes, right? Like, what archetype are you? And how do you just do it on purpose? That is one way in which I see leaders I work with, when we get clear about that, they're like, "Oh, of course, this is always what I do forever. I just never named and claimed it. And now that I have, that can inform the choices I make about example stories I use, how I set up a conversation with a new customer, the way I introduce myself, etc. The types of questions I ask in a collaborative session." So getting clear on what the purpose is of your voice outside of your job is really critical. That's one component. The next component is having a better origin story, the provenance that led you where you are today. So many leaders I hear when they introduce themselves to a room are like, "Hi, I'm Mike. I've been here at pick the company for 17 years. First I led sales, then I moved over to operations, and now I'm in, customer success." Boring. But beyond boring, it doesn't tell me anything about you. So a better origin story, or what I call provenance, is a leader who understands that sharing what drives them and then their achievements as evidence of that lets the room know who they are, not just what they've done. And that's powerful. So you get those two pieces together, you're already knowing your voice better. And then you're able to deploy it in ways that feel aligned to who you are and bridge to the need of the moment.
Yeah, I love that formula.
Thank you. This is all came out of my 20, thousands of coaching sessions. It's not, I just one day I was working with a founder and I was like, wait, so we just identified kind of the purpose of your voice and a better origin story, which is like your provenance, like what drives you, what the source code is of where you are today. We've also kind of developed and these are the next two sections, your point of view in the world around the domain that you operate in. and a playbook for creating the transformation that you want to have in the world, where your venture is an example of that. That's kind of like, that's what you're all about. And then we've kind of figured out what your values are in action, which I would call, your principles. You put all those four together, your purpose, your provenance, your point of view and playbook, and your principles, that becomes the platform for a high impact known voice that you can deploy intentionally at really critical moments. So that's what I mean by finding a voice for a leader. Now, in my call with that founder, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like we figured out what your platform is, but it's not content to use. It's not a script. It's more like a map. It's a platform, but it's also a map. It's a platform map. And so that's what it includes.
Oh, wow. Yes. Yeah, I love that, because then they can weave that in any kind of conversation. It's already, now they've practiced it, they own it. So when they own the language, then people start connecting with them. And so they know when whatever they're presenting, they know they're going to connect at a personal level.
100%. So I'll give you an example. Last year, I worked with a senior leader at a large software company. He had organized at a big event called Money 2020. I don't know if your listeners know what that is, but it's the biggest sort of financial services event, I think, nationally. And he had sponsored a big session, and he had on one side, he was not going to be interviewing people in this session. He was going to be on a panel. But he had brought to the event, to his right, sitting on stage, Derek Jeter, and to his left, Allison Felix, who is an athlete and a businesswoman, entrepreneur. And he was sitting there as like this financial services guy going, what am I doing here? Like, what do I have to offer to this? Like, I'm not a famous baseballer. I'm not a track star and entrepreneur. Granted, he had done a lot of amazing things, but it felt like he was sort of the third wheel. And so I was like, I don't know, what are you doing here? And we did the exercise to develop a better origin story, and we could very quickly see exactly why he was there. And why this moment in financial services needed exactly the kind of leader he is, because of what drives him and what matters to him as a leader in financial services. And he was able to, when they went around the table, tell a better origin story that made it clear to the audience, who, by the way, are all of his buyers. Mm-hmm. He was laying the foundation for considerable sales conversations. Let all those buyers know exactly why he belonged. He wasn't just a software guy up there.
Yeah. Fascinating. It probably made more of a greater impact in reference to the audience because of the work that you did with that client.
Well, and he was like, oh, thank goodness. Because when I know why I'm here, and I can tell the story of why I'm here in a compelling way, I'm showing up more powerfully and more aligned to who I am, and being able to overtly make the connections between this moment and why me. And that answers the question, why does somebody want to find their leadership voice? Because why you, dude?
Yes.
Why you?
Yeah, I love that. I love that strategy. So I believe success leaves clues. And one of those clues that we can follow are leaders and the books that they read. So do you have any books recently, or ones that really have kind of shaped and influenced your career?
A couple. Very long ago, I read one book by the Dalai Lama, but that is so early. I'm going to talk to you about ones that are a little bit more recent, which, by the way, I love a hard and concrete framework. And speaking of which, if folks who are listening here want to design a strategic ask that helps put them more in control of their own future, we have stood up a unique page for your listeners. So if you go to diabondi.com/OB for Obstacle Busters, you're going to find a link to that for folks who are listening. So the books that have really had a huge impact on me, because they have concrete frameworks that I can start to deploy immediately. I'm like almost embarrassed to say, because they're kind of silly, but they're not silly. They're wonderful. But one of them is Mike Michalowicz's Profit First.
That's a great book.
Great book.
Yeah.
Great book. And I just think, every page is actionable. It's fun to read. One thing I find in the business book zone is that everything reads like a 300-page Wikipedia page, and I want to die. And his book, not like that, nor is mine, by the way. So Mike McAllister's Profit First, I think it's just it's not heady and it's wonderful. And he's joyful and transparent. And it's very useful in my own small business. And then the second one, interestingly, is Jen Sincero's "You're a Badass at Making Money." And I think it's because that book forced me to confront my own limiting beliefs. I don't love that term, but my obstacles, to use your language,
Yes.
around wealth building and my own career as an independent professional. So that was great and very productive for me.
Awesome. So I know our listeners are going to want to be able to connect with you. Obviously, you just shared the link that they can be able to connect with you as well. Are there any other special projects that you're working on?
I think we started at this top of the conversation that maybe my next book is around the platform map. We'll see. And I'll be needing test audiences for that. So if folks want to follow me on social, that'd be a great way to know when there's opportunities for folks to be my test audience for that. Although, I've workshopped it for 20 years with clients. It's a different thing when it turns into a book and a talk and, like that. So they can follow me on social media. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. You can find me at Dia Bondi, and Instagram as well, where we post short lessons regularly across the week on how you can speak more powerfully and ask for more and get it.
Well, very good. Well, Dia, I appreciate you being on the show, sharing your strategies and tips, helping our leaders to really break through their obstacles.
I have too much to say. I will not apologize for it, but I will recognize it.
Yes, you dropped some great value bombs in reference within like the strategy of just that new strategy of finding their voice so they can level up their leadership. So this is your host, Warren Wandling, saying until next time, be an obstacle buster and be resilient.